Hey everybody, yeah, if you've watched my earlier videos, this computer probably looks pretty familiar to you. This is my Dual Tualatin, or Tualatin, however you pronounce it, Pentium III computer. And I did a video on this maybe 2 months ago, something like that. It was one of my earlier videos. Funny thing is, when I make these videos, the ones that I usually think are going to get a lot of views, well, a lot to my standards. I mean, to bigger YouTube channels, my views on my videos are like spitting in the ocean. But, you know, the ones I expect to get more views generally don't. Like my anatomy ones where I go over the specific parts and what I think is the best setup for a 386 or a 486. I always think videos like that are going to do well. And they do okay, don't get me wrong. I mean, to my standards, they do pretty okay for what it is. But for whatever reason, the video I did on this machine, other than my PVM video on how to set up a PVM for RGB, the video on this machine actually gets the most views, which I found interesting. So apparently, you know, there is some interest in this kind of machine and the Pentium III and the Tualatin processor. The funny thing is, I wasn't happy with that video, and there's a couple reasons why I was not happy with that video. One is I just kind of wanted to do a video, so I just did it, and you're not really seeing this machine and the processor at its full potential. At the time I was using it for experimenting with environmental bump mapping with the Matrox card. So I mean, it had a Matrox G400 Max in it, which was kind of bottlenecking the processor. It was running Windows 98. It wasn't taking advantage of the two CPUs. The RAM was a little bit more limited. It's just, I didn't get to show off what this possibly could do. And personally, I don't even know. You know, this machine, the Pentium III Tualatin, is supposedly faster and more capable than the early Pentium 4s. So for this video, what I wanted to do is kind of max this machine out, because apparently there is interest in this machine and processor. So in this video, I'm going to try to max this thing out as best I can, and then, you know, do some benchmarks and play some games. The format's going to be a little bit different. Usually what I do, I put these machines together and then I make the video and I kind of go over it. This one, you're kind of take the journey with me. I haven't done anything to this yet. So we're going to go over the parts and I'm going to upgrade it. You know, you're going to do this along with me. So I don't know, you know, the thing with computers, and especially retro computers, it seems when you're going to do a job that you think is going to take 5 minutes, it takes forever. And the jobs you think are going to take forever take 5 minutes. So, you know, this seems like it's going to be an easy upgrade, but for some reason I think I'm going to be sitting at this thing for like 3 hours trying to get it just right. But anyways, so come along with me on this journey and let's see how well we can upgrade this. One thing though, the motherboard in here, it's a Titan Tiger 230, I believe. It's really a server board. It's a workstation motherboard. There's no overclock things in the BIOS or anything. So we will be running with a stock 1.4 gigahertz CPU speed. I don't really have any way to overclock the CPUs. I know there have been people that have been able to get this CPU to overclock stable at, you know, 1.5, 1.6 gigahertz. But we're just going to do this all at 1.4 gigahertz, so that's the stock speed of the CPU. So let's go over what I will actually be putting into this thing to upgrade it. Alright, so here we have the parts over here, and these are generally what I'm going to be upgrading this machine with. I'll just go over here. Not in the pictures XP. When I did the first video, it had Windows 98 on it. What I'm going to do is put on XP Professional. Windows 98 doesn't support SMP, or the dual processors, it does not support them. So when I had Windows 98 on it, it was only using one processor. Also, it was a little bit more limited with RAM, so we'll have a little bit more flexibility RAM-wise with XP. So let me go over what we have here. First thing I'm going to do is upgrade the hard drive. I just have a IDE hard drive in there. It might be 5200 RPM, I'm not sure. Now what I'm going to do is upgrade the main hard drive that's going to have the OS XP on it with a solid state drive. This was a little suspect. It's a Samsung drive, but you know, it's very plain. It's extremely light, but this is only 16 gigabytes. So it was only $6. So I figured, you know, why not? Why not do that? So this is just going to be for my the OS. I actually opened it up because it was kind of suspect, and yeah, I mean, it looks okay. It looks just right in there. I mean, this is SATA 2, I believe. So I mean, that works. I just have some brackets for it. Now there's no SATA connectors in that machine. It's IDE only, so I'm going to have to use a PCI SATA card. I have two here. I'm not really sure which one. I've actually never done that before. I've never put in a RAID or a SATA adapter card into a computer that didn't have onboard SATA. So I mean, I'm expecting it to go, you know, just okay, fine, but you never know. So I have two cards for that, just in case. I'm going to start out with this one, and if that doesn't work, I have this Promise card. That it also has, I think, ATA 133. Although I suspect this card might be slower. I don't know if this supports SATA 2 speeds, but I'm pretty sure this one does. For another hard drive, I have another SATA drive. This will just be for the games. This is a 7200 RPM, 80 gigabyte drive. Again, this is more like an experiment computer. I might even revert it back, you know, to play with more the Matrix stuff when I'm done with this video. But for now, I only need 80 gigabytes for you know, the games I'm going to put on it and test. RAM, it supports PC100 at 2 gigabytes and PC133 up to 1.5 gigabytes. So these are PCI 133. They're not matching sticks. I didn't really feel like spending the money to go out buy sticks of RAM when I already have RAM here. This is a 512 and I've got 256, so that's going to bring me it's a gigabyte. I think a gigabyte of RAM should be fine. And the video I did of it before, it only had 512. So I'll add another 512, bring it up to a gigabyte of PC133 SD RAM. Alright, now finally we have the video card. And the video card I am using is a GeForce 7800 GS. This is 256 megabyte AGP times 8 card. This is one of the faster video cards we have for the AGP bus. So I'm limited to AGP slot in that machine, so I needed to find a really fast AGP card. Unfortunately, these are a little hard to find. The PCIe versions are pretty easy to find, but being this is kind of the last breath of AGP, the AGP versions are a little hard to find, and they can go for quite a premium on eBay, like $60 to $100. I wasn't willing to pay that much, so I kind of waited and looked around. I found this for half that. So I found this card on an app called OfferUp. It's kind of like a Craigslist-y type thing, and it was for 30 bucks. And I tested it, and it works, and that's pretty good. So now, what's going to happen is the CPU is going to be the bottleneck, not the graphics card, where before the Matrix card was actually bottlenecking because the CPU was quite a bit more advanced. This isn't the fastest AGP card out there. I believe there's a Radeon card. I don't know the model number, but it's a little faster or equivalent. There's also a factory overclock version of this card, the 7800 OC. And then there's another version that's like 7850 or 7950, and it's also a little bit faster than this. But since this card itself is probably going to be a bottleneck, anything that's just, you know, incrementally faster really isn't going to make too much of a difference, I don't think. So this card should be good enough for our purposes. See, it also needs a Molex thing. Alright, so let's see how this turns out. Alright, so first issue, other than me putting down screwdrivers and stuff and then not knowing where I put them down. The SATA drive, these things, the adapters I have don't work with it. They don't seem to line up. Like, no matter how I set it, the screw holes don't line up. I think these really were meant for a larger drive or a CD drive, not this little solid state drive. So I don't really think I'm going to be able to use these. So I mean, that's not a big deal. This is really light, so I can probably just put it in and just kind of have it hang. That's not really optimal, but for now it should work. So that's the first little stupid roadblock, so I'm sure there'll be plenty more. Alright, so I actually have the solid state drive installed right under there. It's pretty stable because it's really light, so it's just hooked up right there. I took out the old hard drive. The zip drive I left in there, but I just disconnected it. The CD-ROM drives are just going to stay on the IDE bus. So now I just got to install that RAM right there, and then I'll put in that SATA adapter card, and then we'll see if I can install Windows XP on this thing. Alright, so here's the first RAID card, PCI RAID card I'm going to try. It's a little bit fancy. It has 4 SATA, and then it has some, I think that's called eSATA. I'm not 100% sure on it. If this doesn't work, I have another card. I don't really have like a jumper chart or anything for this. There's a lot of jumpers on it. I'm also going to have to use one like a converter like this. Molex to 2 SATA, and then of course the SATA connectors. So I'm going to install this, and then I'll boot it up for the first time, see if it sees the hard drive, and we can start installing the OS. Alright, so there's the SATA adapter card right there, and I've got it too. I've got the 80 gig SATA drive there, and I've got the other one hooked up there. Got the RAM installed down there. Sorry if it's such a jumble, it's hard to see. And of course I'm gonna have to put in the video card. Forgot about that before I try to install the OS, or else we're not gonna be able to see anything. So that's gonna go right there. Now I don't think this is only a, hold on, it's a 4 times AGP slot. All these stupid wires in the way. That's a 4 times slot, and this is an 8 times card. So even on the motherboard and the slot, I'm not going to be able to take full advantage of this video card, and that's fine. It's also, that's a universal AGP slot, so it should work fine with this card. We won't have to worry about voltage differences and things like that, being that that's a universal slot, which is nice. So let me put the card in and then boot it up and see what happens. Alright, so here's the moment of truth. Everything seems hooked up okay. Got mouse and keyboard, power, video, monitors on and ready. So here comes the moment of truth. Seems so far so good. A little bit loud. I think we got a post. Yep, we got post. Looks like the RAM's counting. Got good RAM count. Okay, there's that RAID card. Looks like it's detecting our 2 boot from a CD. Okay, it looks good. I mean, I got a boot disk failure, of course, because those drives are blank. There's nothing on them. But it looks good. Better than I thought. Everything's looking good here. So I just have to try to install the OS. The only thing I saw maybe is I think the hard drives got flipped around. We want 0 to be the, well, it said 14 gigabyte drive. That's still fine. And we want the bigger 80 gigabyte conventional hard drive to be our secondary drive. So that's about the only thing. That's just a quick cable swap, and then looking good. I'm pleased. All right, I don't know if you can hear this. This computer is very loud. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fans going on in it, and they are not the quietest fans, but it seems to be working. I've got Windows XP Professional setup going. Here is the SSD drive, 15272 megabytes. It's unpartitioned. Here's that 80 gigabyte one. I didn't check this thing out or format or anything beforehand, but it's kind of weird. It's got like a fat partition here and a partition too, but we can iron that out later. So let's try to install to that the SSD, the solid state drive. I am expecting an error. My copy of XP is weird, and it gets to a certain file. I think it's like article dot something, and it stops. I have to swap it with another XP CD, and then it keeps going from there. So it's kind of weird, but I kind of expect that. I need a new Windows XP Professional disk. So let's hope it does something here. Huh. Well, that was too easy. It looks like there's something wrong with my keyboard now. My keyboard is not responding. Alright, here we are again. Human error, guys. I had in my haste, I had put the keyboard and mouse in the opposite PS2 ports. It happens. Anyways, it did give me the opportunity to format that C drive. So we're back at this point. So this has been a suspiciously hassle-free effort. It's very suspicious. So let's see how it goes now. We're going to format it for NTFS. Okay, so what that problem was, that was an issue because my card has a lot of these AGP cards. A lot of the later AGP cards aren't native AGP, so they use an AGP to PCIe bridge in there. So after some poking around, I figured out to fix that weird problem that it just kind of like freezes up and the graphics goof up when you load up XP. You want to go into BIOS and go down to AGP fast write. Oh, I just missed it. I'll go back up there, but well, it's actually I already disabled it. So you want to disable that option, and that, for me, that fixed things right up. So if you have the same issue doing something similar, even with a different later AGP card, try this trick first. Just go into BIOS and turn off the AGP fast write. And here, these are my RAM speed settings. I'm just switching them all to turbo. Sometimes it can cause instability, so watch out for that. So I know if I'm playing a game or doing testing, this is probably going to be the first thing I go and set back to like normal or fast. You know, you just kind of like tone it down until whatever you're trying to run works. So I'm just setting all these to turbo. Okay, so you may be noticing up there there's a frequency voltage control, and it says change CPU's clock and voltage. It's a trick in this BIOS. It just is for the auto detect dim PCI thing. Yeah, there's really no options on this server board for doing, you know, messing around with the CPU frequency and voltage. So that's just a dirty trick right there. So I'm just gonna go to save and exit, and this thing boots up like super quick with the solid state drive. Just watch how fast this thing boots up. Memory testing, I think I can disable that in BIOS, but usually I just keep that. But yeah, okay, so there's the post screen. Then here's the SATA controller. Boom boom, the two hard drives, and then pow. Alright, so I thought that whole installation and setup process went a little bit too easily, surprisingly easily. Everything sort of worked. I had to do some minor things, but I did hit a snag. Obviously, this card, as you can see, is not installed. Okay, so first off, I was having a lot of troubles with this card. Now, when I first installed it and Windows XP installed fine and everything came up fine, and the Windows default VGA drivers seemed to work just fine. I mean, obviously it's just basic VGA, so you know, your basic you get your desktop and your basic stuff, but you can't run really any games because without the drivers for the card, it's still like it's choppy. It's just the basics, so you can pretty much see desktop. You can't really game or do anything significant without the card, the drivers to run the, you know, the actual card. But every time I would install drivers, I would have issues. It would either not boot up, or it would freeze when I'd ever try to open a program, a game, anything like that, benchmark tests. Now, first, I was getting that problem, like you saw, where it would come up, and Windows XP would load up, and I'd get the arrow, and then it would freeze, it'd be all black, and you'd get like a distorted arrow. And I found out that's because this card it uses a bridge chip on it. It's not native AGP. So what it is, it's really like a PCIe card, and there's a chip that translates, you know, the PCIe protocol to AGP, and then you have the AGP bus. And apparently that causes some issues with certain motherboards like mine. And I was able to get around that by, as I showed earlier, by turning off that AGP fast write. But apparently, I think it's probably because that bridge chip, it was having a lot of other issues. It would not, like I said, it was freezing up no matter what driver versions I tried. Finally, I was able to get it to run programs and benchmarks. I had to go in and I had to disable the ×4 AGP. I'm not sure what that does. I think it slows it down. The programs did run, but I think it's probably best if I show you the results of that. Okay, yeah, so that's what was going on from that. Basically, my plans to use this card are pretty much nixed for that machine. So my project for the video is going to be on hold till I can find sort of a replacement. I'm looking at a couple options, possibly the 6800 GeForce, since it is native AGP. Hopefully that will work. It's kind of the next more powerful card down. So I'll get back. I'll see how that turns out. Hey guys, alright, so this thing arrived today. Actually arrived yesterday, but it was the post office. I didn't go pick it up until today. This is a GeForce 6800 OC. So, the 7800 didn't work. I suspect it was because the PCIe to AGP bridge or whatever. This is native. This is native AGP. So hopefully I will have better luck with this card. Yes, it is slower, but it is very fast. It has same connections. The 7800 had 256 megabytes of RAM. This only has 128. But I still think this is more than enough for a 1.4 gigahertz Pentium 3. This isn't the fastest 6800. There's a 6800 Ultra. But, you know, those things, again, they're up there in the $60 to $100 price range, and I've already spent more than I want to on this project, and I don't think it really would have made a difference, because I think this is already more than fast enough for the Tualatin Pentium 3. So I'm going to install this now, and hopefully this will work because it is native AGP. There's no bridge chip. So let's cross our fingers and hope this one works. So apparently this is a bad card. I put it in the Tualatin, it's screwed up. I was getting jarbled images. Just to make sure, I put it in this motherboard here, which is a newer one. It has a ×8 AGP port. Shouldn't have any issues. In case it was the board that was too old for it that was messing it up. But yeah, apparently the card itself's defective. So that's another setback. So I guess we'll see when this project gets done. Alright, finally got my new GeForce 6800 OC in the mail. Took a couple weeks, but here it is. Hopefully this one will work. I haven't tried it yet. So it came in an envelope, which usually isn't a good sign, but it was actually packed pretty well for being sent in an envelope. So I'm going to stick this in the PC and we'll hope maybe third time is a charm. So let's find out. Okay, oh yeah, and while this thing is out of the case, let's just look at this heat sinks. I've never had this out of the case before, and these are the heat sinks this thing came with, and they are really big and overkill. Actually, so much so, they actually cover up the, where is it? There's a, you know, the handle you have to use to pull the disc, you know, or pop the CPU out. It actually covers it over it, so you have to take the heatsink off to remove the CPU, which I guess you should do anyways, but they are just like massive cooler heat sinks for this kind of CPU. It's a bit overkill, but they are kind of cool. So I'm just gonna put it back in and cross my fingers and hope it doesn't crap out on me again. Alright. So, yeah, every time I put it back in the case, it just wasn't starting up. Something's shorting it somewhere, and I didn't feel like spending the next 5 hours trying to figure it out, so I'm just going to do these outside of the case. So, I've got the board running, I got it powered up. You see here's the 6800 OC, and I just got a sound card, and then I've got the 2 hard drives hooked up. So I did have some stability problems. I don't know if this board still has a cap shorting out or something, but it was freezing up a lot certain programs. For instance, if I try to run MSI Afterburner, it freezes up. I'm using drivers 93.71 Forceware. I've talked to other people who use those drivers with similar setups, and they seem to work for them. I turned off AGP fast writes in the BIOS. That seems to be helping a little bit. So right now I have it capturing by, I'm going to run some benchmarks in capture. I don't know if you can see that. So I have it outputting through digital and through analog. Analog's going up to my monitor, and that's a DVI to HDMI converter. And I have that going to my Elgato right here, and that's going to my secondary PC, and it's capturing. Although for, I don't know, whatever reason, the capturing through this method, even when it's in high definition, for the PC, it always comes out like looking pretty sucky, like you can't read any of the text and stuff. But when I use this device on like an Xbox 360, it looks perfect, but for some reason, through the computer, you know. But anyway, since MSI Afterburner doesn't seem to be running correctly, it freezes up. I'm just using this method, which it's really cool that these can actually output digital and analog at the same time. I really like that. And you just set that up through the driver, the NVIDIA utility, and you can set the display to clone, where it will clone the display, digital and the analog. It sends the same image out through both of those. Okay. Well, I finally got this thing running stable, at least outside the case, but that's, you know, that's just a technicality. I'd rather have it outside for benchmarking stuff right now anyways, in case something happens, but I see, you know, it obviously can be put into a case. I just need to figure out what it's touching that's been shorting it, and why it suddenly decided to do that when it's worked for years without that problem. But anyways, I think I have figured out the instability issues, and they were exactly what, you know, I should have done in the first place. It was in the BIOS. It was, again, having to disable AGP fast write and AGP ×4. I don't know why this should be a native AGP card. I guess maybe it's just too new for this board. This board does use a VIA chipset, which somewhere right there. I've never had great luck with VIA chipsets. I don't really want to use the word crappy, but they've always been kind of quirky. So, and I mean, there's, a good couple years that separate this card and this board and, the slot. So it could be any reason, but the good thing is it does, with those turned off, it does run fine, whereas the 7800 gave me those weird graphical issues. This seems to run fine. It's still very fast with those features turned off. I was also able to put my RAM on turbo settings, and I've had complete stability. I ran this thing for 4 or 5 hours doing benchmarks and playing games yesterday, and I had no issues with it. So it seems like it's finally been kind of straightened out. So we're gonna take a look at those benchmarks and some of that gameplay, and we'll see how well this thing upgraded from the previous configuration. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at here is PC Mark 2002. And you can see I have the stats for the old setup with the G400 Max and Windows 98 on the left. As you can see, the scores aren't too horribly different here. I don't know if PC Mark 2002 really takes graphics card into account. CPU scores are pretty much the same. Difference is negligible. Memory, we do have a pretty significant increase in the new setup, and same with the hard drive score, probably because with the solid state drive and with the memory, I think the old one I might have been going with PC100, although that memory score might have gone up just because the memory's doubled. Again, I'm not 100% sure how PC Mark 2002 figures out its scores. So next we're going to move on to 3D Mark 2001 SE. Okay, so before I start talking about 3D Mark 2001, I just want to say image quality on these captures, it kind of varies sometimes. Just keep in mind that on the actual monitor, on the computer playing, it actually looks a lot better. I just haven't 100% figured out this yet. I don't know why the Elgato through DVI HDMI looks pretty much perfect. I don't know. It should. I don't really think there's any real conversion going on or anywhere or anything, but I just can't get it to look right sometimes, especially with text. Here it looks okay, but a lot of text looks kind of not, you can't even really read it. So if anyone has any tips for that, for VGA capture, or using the Elgato with VGA capture, please let me know. But anyways, just talking about 2001, 3D Mark 2001 SE, frames per second scores are pretty good on the low detail sections or the low detail tests. Getting usually well above 60 frames per second, usually up in the hundreds. On the high detail ones, again, it's pretty good. It rarely drops down into the like mid-20s frames per second, but completely playable. Still looks really good on these. Yeah, to be honest, I'm pretty impressed. Like I said, a lot of these tests, it really stayed above 60 frames per second. But again, keep in mind these are synthetic benchmarks, so it's not 100% accurate to actually playing a game. Comparative scores, though, comparative with my old setup, thankfully I remember to document my older setup. It's like night and day. On the old setup with the G400 Max and Windows 98 SE had a score of 1,732. With the new setup, with the 6800 OC, I get 7,690, which is a pretty significant score bump. So you can see the upgrade definitely is having an effect here. So let's move on to 3D Mark 2003. Just let me apologize again. For some reason here, it might be a little bit more noticeable, but yeah, the image it's really not up to snuff. But again, any tips for VGA capture or tweaks or something I'm not doing, let me know. But anyways, this is PC Mark 2003, and these tests are a little bit more unforgiving than the other ones. They're a little bit more stressful on the machine than the others, and it still holds up well through pretty much all the tests that utilize the graphics card and everything together. I was getting between 30 and 60 frames per second, sometimes higher. So that's pretty good. Yeah, I was pretty impressed at this point, because like I said, I think this benchmark is a little more stressful than the prior ones, which makes sense because it's later, so it's geared for a little bit more higher end at the time. But yeah, all the tests did pretty well. The only time where it did dip into the 20s and actually below 20s, which was the nature test, which is pretty intense. It's a little bit stressful on the machine and the graphics card, but it's still pretty much soldiered on through it. I think a couple times it dropped under 20, but probably for the majority of the test it actually did stay above 30 frames per second. So yeah, not bad at all. So final score from 3D Mark 2003 is 7,690. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the old, this ran on the old machine to compare scores, so I don't really know how that stacks up, but there's the score. So let's move on to some actual game benchmarks, and we're going to start with the Doom 3 time demo. Okay, so as you can see here, I'm going to do this time demo at 1024 by 768 resolution on high settings. I haven't messed with VSync here. These are tests run with the sound off. I didn't actually know how to enable sound through the time demo, but if you know, Doom 3 was a pretty intense game for the era. So it was hard for a lot of systems to run at the time. Unless they were like really high end. And this is kind of a neat little time demo that's in the game, and it kind of gives you an idea the performance of whatever setup you're running it on. So yeah, playing it on this machine, I was actually kind of impressed. It's completely playable. Again, we're not running at 60 frames per second here, but it's pretty good. Now keep in mind too, this isn't completely representative of if you're playing the game. The performance is probably slightly lesser playing the game, but it's really not a huge difference. And running the time demo is a really good kind of indicator on what your actual gameplay will be like. So yeah, I was pretty impressed how this did, which I think we were yeah, there we go, 36.7 frames per second. So that's pretty good. And just to compare, I also ran the time demo on ultra settings with 1280 x 1024 resolution, and I still got a frames per second rate of 31.7, so completely playable. Okay, so lastly here I'm gonna be running Unreal Tournament 2004 edition. Now this is going to be on the highest setting, so everything is set to highest. Now yeah, I understand this isn't the most demanding game. I think the recommended specs are like an 800 megahertz Pentium 3 and whatnot, but on the highest settings it still can be kind of, you know, demanding, especially if there's all kind of things going on. And as you can see, it ran pretty good. So yeah, Unreal Tournament 2004, pretty good frame rates. It stayed above 30 frames per second most of the time, pretty much the whole time actually. But yeah, it actually looks and played and ran really well for being on a Pentium 3. Yeah, so that's it. I kind of wanted to run more, more game footage, but at this point I was kind of tired, and all my games are like in boxes and they're buried in the closet, and I just didn't feel like going through and pulling stuff out. So I might do a follow-up video on a later date. But yeah, impressive, at least in my opinion. Playable in my opinion. I know some people demand 60 frames per second, but come on, it's a Pentium 3 with newer type games.
So, I guess as Jerry Springer would say, final thoughts. Did I like how this video turned out, or is going to turn out, and was the upgrade to this machine a success? On the first point, no. I mean, I haven't put together and edited the video yet, but there's stuff I wanted to do that I just didn't get to do. I wanted to run more benchmarks. I wanted to really push the system. Like, I wanted to play Crysis on it, just to see how well it would do. I didn't expect much. But, you know, I'm just getting tired. I've been working on this for so long. The last 2 days, all the little roadblocks and issues, it's just giving me a headache. I'm just kind of tired of it, and I just want to wrap up this video. I don't really want it to be like 5 hours long or however long it's going to turn out to be. Hopefully at the most around the 40-minute mark, but who knows. Yeah, so I did want to run some more benchmarks and stuff. So I don't know if I'm going to be 100% happy with this video, but it is what it is. I'm just done with it. Did the upgrade turn out okay? Yeah, I think it did. I'm actually pretty impressed. After working out all the bugs and the troubleshooting and stuff, it was pretty stable. I mean, today, with all the issues worked out, I had no issues whatsoever. No crashes, nothing. It worked perfect. And yeah, the upgrade's really nice. This machine is pretty capable with all the upgrades. It actually played Doom pretty well, Doom 3 pretty well. No problems with Unreal Tournament 2004 on all the highest settings. It impressed me in the benchmarks. So yeah, the Tualatin system with a high-end video card like the 6800, it's a pretty capable system. I'm actually pretty impressed with this thing. It held up really well. As a day-to-day thing, I'm sure it wouldn't really have problems surfing the internet and playing those early 2000, mid-2000 games. So yeah, I mean, I'm impressed. I'm happy with the upgrade. I don't know if I'll keep it because I have other uses for this machine, but yeah, you can upgrade this thing. It's pretty decent. Now, modern games, no, it doesn't stand a chance. But I was impressed. It can be a capable machine. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Maybe I'll come back to this machine and just do a video with some other benchmarks and some other games and see how they run on it. But I think that's about it for now. I'm going to take a break from this machine. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video and stuff like this, please subscribe. Let me know if you like this kind of like build video where we go through the process of putting it together and kind of troubleshooting as I go, compared to some of the other videos where I have the machine put together already and I just tell you it, from the ending standpoint. So yeah, let me know how you like this video, and thank you for watching.